I am Blaine Davis. My father was Hugh Davis. My father built the blue whale, and his handprints are still in that concrete. Are you listening to the Route 66 podcast?
My name is Linda Ross Hobbs. I am the gift shop manager at the Blue Whale, and I am listening to the Route 66 podcast.
Route 66, Route 66, right along with the Route 66 podcast. For talks with people living and working along the Mother Road, the main street of America, from Chicago to LA, bore a heavy, heavy load. Route 66, Route 66. Sometimes historical paths aren't discovered until they're lost. Right along with the Route 66 podcast.
Hello and welcome aboard the Route 66 podcast for talks with people living and working along the Mother Road. I'm your host, Anthony Arno. I'd like to thank you for joining us here today on our journey. I hope you and your family and loved ones are well during these troubling times. This is our second episode with the Blue theme, the first one being the last one where I spoke with Kevin Mueller, owner of the Blue Swallow Motel in Tucumcari, New Mexico. That episode hasn't even been out for a month yet, and it's already seen well over 1,000 downloads. Wow. Today we visit the Blue Whale, and we'll be talking with Blaine Davis, whose father Hugh built the Blue Whale. Both Blaine and the Blue Whale gift shop manager, Linda Hobbs, will be joining us today. I hope you're well during these times of COVID-19. School for me as a teacher is officially closed for the rest of the academic year, and I'm teaching online, which is a whole new dimension to learning. I would like to share some news with you. Those of you who have been following the podcast through the years know that I'm an elementary school teacher. Well, I retired last year from teaching elementary school in New Jersey and went back to school for my STEM certification. STEM is a newer term in the educational field, and it didn't exist when I first entered the classroom 30 years ago, but it basically incorporates science, technology, engineering, and math, all into one subject. And as an elementary school teacher, I've always enjoyed launching rockets with the kids after school, with the Science Olympiad Club, or just building bridges with the kids and crushing them for testing strength. I once had a popsicle stick bridge that held over 135 pounds. So, over the past school year, I've been so excited about STEM, and I began teaching middle school STEM just outside of Philadelphia. My annual Route 66 trip last summer along the western portion of the Mother Road included numerous side trips that were STEM-related, as I was finishing up my certification at Millersville University, and I needed to keep a STEM journal. I attended a one-week computer science conference in Phoenix. I toured Biosphere 2 in Oracle, Arizona. I spent an afternoon in the Tombstone, Arizona Newspaper Museum, which features the history of printing, and I even drove up to Tuba City to see a private collection of a Navajo code talker. So with the current COVID-19 outbreak, school is closed for the rest of the year, and I'm currently teaching from home. In fact, our last day of school is Monday, June 22nd. And if that weren't challenging enough, the current groups of students I'm teaching I've never even met before because the marking period began March 9th, the last week of school. So, two very important announcements I'd like to share with you. I'm currently preparing to launch yet another podcast. This will be the fourth podcast I have out there. I have this one. I have the New Teacher podcast where I interview both state and national teachers of the year. And I even have one for a side hustle business where we put out plastic pink flamingos on your front lawn to celebrate a milestone birthday. The newest podcast I'm preparing to launch this summer is the STEM Class Podcast. And the interviews I've collected are just as interesting and inspirational as what you would hear right here on the Route 66 podcast. Future episodes will feature Andy Weir, who wrote The Martian, Frances Carter, a 97-year-old woman who was a real-life Rosie the Riveter, working in a Birmingham B-29 factory during World War II. And I even have a 92-year-old Peter McDonald, who's just one of 5 surviving Navajo code talkers with an actual Route 66 connection. Be sure to check out more information at thestemclass.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. Once classes end, I'm hoping to have that up and running by the middle of the summer. So that's the first announcement. The second announcement is that if you're a longtime listener to this show, you know all about my passion for Route 66 as an educator. It all started over 20 years ago when I had my students bicycle 2,000 miles in the back of the classroom aboard an exercise bicycle while learning all about the Mother Road. You can hear all about my backstory here on episode number 1. Well, the recent nationwide closure of schools has put a new twist on teaching, and despite the many challenges, I've been encouraged by seeing students become excited about learning by going above and beyond what was expected of them during a time of remote instruction. This includes students taking a concept I might have introduced by video and doing it on their own in their kitchen or in the backyard. One activity that comes to mind, I was doing a whole unit on towers and building. I had video footage of the Leaning Tower of Pisa. I constructed an Oreo tower out of Oreo cookies. By the way, the record is 82 Oreo cookies stacked within 60 seconds time. So the key to student success during this unprecedented time is to actively engage the students in an idea that encourages creative, hands-on learning. So as an educator and a Route 66 fan, I'm inviting all students in grades K to 12 to dig deep into their creative energy and submit an entry in the Route 66 Podcast Scholarship Program. Awards range from $25 to $100 and will be given to students to deepen their knowledge about Route 66 by submitting a project based on promoting and preserving the Mother Road, often referred to as America's Main Street. Students are encouraged to listen to past episodes of the podcast for ideas and topics that may be of interest as a starting point. They do not need to live along Route 66, but simply have an interest in promoting Route 66. The guidelines for this event is very open-ended to accommodate all interested students, and applicants are encouraged to be as creative as possible, as long as the finished product meets the criteria of both promoting and preserving Historic 66. Projects may include, but are not limited to, artwork, photographs, crafts, interviews, performance, music, videos, PowerPoint, or other types of multimedia presentations. Artwork, photographs, and crafts need to physically be submitted to me here at the Route 66 podcast. All the other entries can be digitally submitted. Previously published Route 66 podcast episodes serve as an excellent starting point for a wide range of topics. Scholarship amounts range from $25 to $100 for students in grades K to 12. Additional information can be found at route66podcast.com. Good luck to everyone, and the deadline is July 31st, 2020. And now listener feedback. I've invited my listeners to leave a message at the route66podcast.com sharing their earliest memory of Route 66. I mentioned I would be selecting one lucky winner to win a Route 66 washable face mask. There were many entries, and thank you to everyone who took the time to submit an entry. Here's one I'd like to share with you. It's from Paul from St. Peters, Missouri.
Hello, Anthony. My first memory of Route 66 was in the late 80s. I was a truck driver running routes along Wilmington, Illinois, all the way down to Atlanta, Illinois. We recycled the used cooking oil, and I remember the launching pad, the log cabin, the Dixie, of course. And I didn't realize how important Route 66 was until the later years. I'm currently still working for that company, but I'm in the management part of it. I enjoy your show. Again, this is Paul Beaufort in St. Peters, Missouri.
Thanks, Paul. And from the email, here's one from Jerry. When I was younger, my parents took me on long road trips from our home in Reedsburg, Wisconsin. Those experiences gave me the bug for Route 66 road trips. Now I'm 62, living in Milwaukee, and have the itch for road trips. On multiple trips, I've traveled almost the entire route, except for the washout of Amboy, California. I was on the road recently visiting the National Tallgrass Prairie south of Joliet. I've stayed in both wigwam motels and many others on the route. Oklahoma is my favorite of the Route 66 states, but I love the Native American crafts available in New Mexico and Arizona. I enjoy listening to your podcasts. Jerry Krug. And here's some from Jay Burlow from Fort Worth, Texas. Another great podcast. We had the pleasure of staying at the Blue Swallow in April 2019. They did a great job of renovating a classic motel, and we were very glad we had a chance to stay. Good to hear the rest of the story. Thank you for all you do on the podcast. I'm looking forward to the next one with the Blue Whale podcast. Thanks, Jay, and it's coming up before you know it. And here's one from Dan Hurley from Massachusetts. We've had very much enjoyed so many episodes of your podcast. Your enthusiasm for Route 66 is palpable, and the characters you have shared are remarkable. I've dreamed of traveling the entire length of Route 66 since the 1980s. Of course, career and kids took precedence, but the time is now growing near. We've recently purchased a 1964 Pontiac Grand Prix as one step of the dream. My new hobby is plowing through every little detail of Route 66 I can find. Your podcast has identified many new stars on the road that I wouldn't have found otherwise. You've also created a three-dimensional personality and image from many other stars, some human, some geographical. I wish you could see our smiles as we listen to the voices of legends such as Angel Delgadillo, Dawn Welsh, Joel Baker, Michael Wallace, and of course, the Harvey Girls. There are so many more that I haven't yet heard, and I'm anxious to hear them all. Well, thank you to my many listeners who took the time to share with me their earliest experience of Route 66, either through email or through SpeakPipe at route66podcast.com. For the next episode, I invite you to leave me a memory of your favorite Route 66 t-shirt. Yes, we all have one, and if I share your story with my listeners, I'll be sending you a Route 66 face mask. And now, here's the trivia question for today's show. On the last episode, I spoke to Kevin Mueller, owner of the Blue Swallow Motel in Tucumcari. Kevin and his wife purchased the Blue Swallow after working for Valvoline in Michigan for over 20 years. Originally, what type of business drew them into Tucumcari before even considering buying the Blue Swallow? The answer after today's show. So we're talking today with Blaine Davis. Blaine, thank you so much for joining me today on the Route 66 podcast.
Well, I'm glad to be here. I'll take time out to talk about what happened in the past.
Okay. Blaine, what is your earliest memory of Route 66?
Well, for many years when I was young, and I'm talking when you would first remember things, probably 4, 5, 6 years old, my parents traveled 66 in order to get to places to do things that they did, which mostly collecting rattlesnakes. I can remember that. Part of our trip took us on Route 66 until we headed toward the Wichita Mountains. And of course, 66 doesn't run through the Wichita Mountains, but you have to use it to get there, or back then you had to use it to get there from the Tulsa area.
My earliest memory of Route 66 was probably in the 70s, but I didn't know it was Route 66. I traveled with my in-laws. And so those are my earliest memories, but I didn't know it was Route 66.
How did your parents meet?
I remember them saying that each one of them had lost a spouse. My mother lost her husband in the first marriage in an auto accident. He had a flat tire on the side of the road and was changing a tire, and car come by and sideswiped him, and she lost him. And then my dad had married a local girl from Tulsa. He lost her to a tropical disease that she got when they took their honeymoon trip down in the Caribbean. Now, this was way before the days of cruise ships like we have now, but both of them lost spouses, and then they met at Kane's Ballroom. I'm not sure who my father came with, but my mother went there with her older brother, and that's how they met, at Kane's Ballroom.
What a great story. Blaine, most kids probably grew up in a family where their dad was either a mechanic or he had a business. Tell us about your dad. What type of work did your dad do?
Well, he was director of the zoo there in Tulsa for 36 years. Prior to that, he had made a year-long trip to Africa in 1933, in the heart of the Depression, as a photographer, among other things, with Martin Johnson, who was a filmmaker at that time. And that was his early start in it. He took a short time off from the zoo to do that. Well, it wasn't exactly a short time, nearly a year, but that was his life's work.
When I started volunteering at the Blue Whale, and very soon was with Oklahoma's Route 66 organization. And then you start seeing the whole scope of the big picture, and it's amazing. I met Hugh and Zelta Davis because they were friends with my in-laws, and their son moved in across the street from my in-laws. So naturally, I met Hugh and Zelta, some of their grandchildren, and I remember Hugh Davis was always working. He was always working on something. He was soft-spoken, like this person that his mind was always working, building something else. He was such a kind, gentle soul. And then I started volunteering. And then once the first summer, what made me stay, because I only intended to stay 1 year, it was like a healing process for me.
Absolutely.
I worked off grief. Second year, I went up to the gift shop, and that's when you really start connecting with life and people. Hugh, once I started that first summer, and no one could tell me the gentleman's name that built the well, I was like, oh, no, this is all. So that led me to stay. It was like no one knew he was zoo director when he was 23. That was in 1932.
Wow.
And I was like, no one could tell me that. No one knew it was an anniversary present. No one knew. And it was a great photo op. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute now. You know, he was photographing wildlife expeditions, never used a blueprint except on the whale. And I'm like, so this man, I got to read his journals, his diaries. And the more I read, the more I realized that this kind, soft-spoken gentleman that I had known just had led this amazing, wonderful life. And that's when I thought, okay, the world needs to know this.
So, Blaine, what were some of the milestones or the accomplishments while he was at the zoo that he introduced to the city of Tulsa?
Oh, my gosh. A laundry list of them. He made an awful lot of presentations to school groups, usually grade school groups. Sometimes it was junior high and high school. And he traveled to the school, took different animals and things with him. It varied from time to time, and he also dealt heavily in scout work and helping scouts and everything. He himself being an Eagle Scout, one of the first ones in Tulsa.
Wow. And, that's very impressive.
At that time, he had accomplished every badge that they had to do. Of course, nowadays they have more, but he had done them all.
That's incredible. I was an Eagle Scout. I am an Eagle Scout. From 1984, I became an Eagle Scout. Blaine, what was it like when you would go to work with your dad?
Well, being a kid, I mostly entertained myself. He was doing his zoo work and working with his fellow employees and things like that. And I'd get a fishing pole and go fishing. The Mohawk Zoo area had and still has a lot of little creeks in it and small ponds and things like that. I was pretty good at entertaining myself.
Did you have a favorite animal at the zoo?
Well, I don't know as a favorite. Now, there were some that I liked better than the others. Of course, we always had some kind of animal in our home. Orphans and things like that, or ones that were sick, were brought to the house and nurtured back to health, if possible, by my mother. And we had those at home. We also had chimpanzees, which belonged to the zoo, but they required a little more daily stuff, and they were good. I know one thing that I do remember. At the time, I had a pet bobcat.
Wow.
And the bobcat was just like as if you had a pet cat. It followed me everywhere I went. It did everything that I did, and people would do a double take when they'd see me, because usually don't see a kid with a bobcat in tow.
Blaine, let's talk a little bit about your mother, Zelta Davis. Your dad had an enormous amount of love for her. What was your mom like?
My mom was she was actually the disciplinarian of the family. My dad was pretty easygoing, and if you got on the wrong side of him, he was more likely to set you down and talk to you and get his point across that way rather than the rod or the belt or whatever. He could, if I was due discipline, he would sit down and talk to me about it, and when he got through, I could usually go out the door without opening the door. I could crawl under it. He'd make you realize what he was talking about. And my mother, she was different. She was the one who did the, the part of discipline that most people did. If a little swat on the butt was required, I got it. And it was usually not repeated.
What were some of Zelta's interests?
My mom was a voracious reader. That's how she entered every day. When it came time to go to bed, and her bedtime was much later than my father's. My father was early to bed, early to rise, that type of stuff. She's one that would get up a little later. Of course, she'd fix breakfast or something like that. But she stayed up late. But when it was time to go to bed, there was always a book in her hand and a cup of coffee sitting by the bed. And she would read the book, drink the coffee, and go straight to sleep.
Now, do you have a favorite story or a book that she read to you when you were a little boy that you remember?
Oh, my gosh. Our house was always full of books, all kinds of books. Quite a selection. There was always National Geographic in the house as far as magazines go. Look magazine and Life magazine, history books, real life books, fiction, a general mix. And I was raised up with a house that halfway looked like a library.
Cool, very cool.
And I still loved it. I read every day. I read something. I can't do without a print version of a newspaper.
I agree. So, your dad retires. What is retirement like, early retirement like for your dad, Hugh Davis?
He had to do something. He had to stay busy. My father was not one that would sit down and do nothing. He was not a rocking chair person. But what gave him the idea for a whale, he had already built a lot of things in that area, the swimming hole. And the kids always wanted something bigger. And he would build something which would be a little bigger, and then the next thing you know, the kids wanted something bigger, and then the next thing you know, they wanted something bigger. And so he just decided one day, I'll fix that. And he started sketching on a piece of paper what he wanted to do. And he ended up building the whale, which is a fairly good-sized project. He'd never done any concrete work before, very limited, nothing to that extent. And the steel work, he did not do welding, but he had a friend that he talked into helping him. I'm sure there were times when that friend kind of scratched his head and wondered how he ever got talked into that, but that's what friends are for. So, the story goes that he gave it to my mother as you cannot give something like that as a surprise. I mean, it's obvious he's building it right in front of you. And she saw this going on. It took 2 years to build it. I think the surprise was, but it probably wasn't surprising to her, when it came their anniversary day. He's like most men, and he totally forgot that it was anniversary day. And when Mom probably said, "You know what today is?" he thought, "Oh, crap." Yes, and I have something for you. And he said, "You're the only woman in the world who has one of these, and here it is. Here's your whale." At that time, it was not blue yet. It was just natural concrete color. And she, in her spirits, knowing him, accepted it and thought, I'm the only woman in the world who has one of these.
Blaine, how did he hone in on a whale? What made him pick the whale of any animal in the world?
Two things. My mother was always interested in whales, although I do not believe that my mother ever actually saw a live whale. I don't think she was ever any place to have seen a live whale. She was always fascinated by them. and the other was the kids were always wanting something bigger and bigger and bigger, and that's the biggest thing on the earth, during our time. So when they wanted something bigger and he was tired of building things, he thought, I'll build them this, and that ought to take care of it. And it did.
And what is the size of the blue whale?
It's 80 feet long from nose to tip of the tail. Stands, about 15, 18 feet high. I don't remember the exact measurements on it, although we've redecked it several times. So, and surprisingly, even though that thing is built out in the water, and it was built in the water, the pond was not drained and built on dry land. It was built while it was full of water, and no cofferdam or anything like that. That thing, to this day, does not have a fatigue crack in it, even after all of our little mini earthquakes that we had here in Oklahoma.
Really? Wow. Now, in those days, I don't think your dad had cement trucks pulling up to the property. How did he physically get all that cement there?
A bag at a time. And it was not delivered in a truck. He did it a bag at a time because he only worked on it when he felt like working on it. And, of course, concrete's heavy, and he's carrying it up and down the ladders and stuff. So he would mix up a 5-gallon bucket full, and then he would pour it into another bucket, and you carry about 2.5 gallons of concrete up and down, around there, any place he needed it, and then put it down. It was all done by hand. There was no gunite or anything like that. And there were coal seams every day. And concrete workers will tell you that you're not supposed to do coal seams, you pour it on one day and do it and stuff like that. He had many, many coal seams, but what he would do at night when he'd got through, or whenever he got through working for that day, he would take gunny sacks and soak those in water, lay it on top of the exposed edge. When he came back the next morning, he'd pull it off. And
wow.
So it was always damp. It was never allowed to dry out. And that's one of the amazing things to me is that thing doesn't have fatigue cracks in it. There's a lot of start-stop places in 2 years' time, but you can't see them. Yeah.
How many bags do you think he went through?
There was 126 bags of concrete mixed.
Wow.
Now, that takes an awful lot of sand and stuff. There's over 19,000 pounds of crushed stone.
Oh, my goodness.
15 tons of sand. That kind of stuff.
In addition to the blue whale, on the property is also the Ark, A-R-K. Tell us about that.
That preceded the blue whale by a couple of years. It is in disarray now and will not be survived. It's past the point of being able to save, so it's just kind of sitting there waiting to go into history. It was built as a place to serve several purposes. One, as a ticket office, per se, the alligator farm, which started it all here, and yes, they were live alligators. And it had snakes and alligators and all kinds of things that you would normally see at the zoo, but when he retired, he just knew where to get them and did and started that. But the Ark was built to take care of that, also to have a place for my mom to kind of get in and out of the weather, and she had a very small gift shop there, postcards, things like that.
What is it like running the gift shop?
Amazing. I always look for custom items because if you're the blue whale, at this point it is not trademarked or copyrighted. So everyone sells blue whale things, and it's it's a challenge because a lot of my things are custom. I search really hard. I have for those things because we want to be unusual. We want to be different. We have to be. So I have a beautiful lady that makes custom jewelry, and we only sell it here. It's a challenge. It is a challenge, and sometimes you'll think, oh, I've got enough of this, enough of that. I don't. You'll look around and it's almost gone, and you're like, oh.
What is the most popular item that sells at the gift shop?
What is the most popular item? I honestly, it's like probably every other shop, stickers, because if you're traveling, they're easy in luggage, and if they're flying back overseas, it's lightweight. Magnets, pins, keychains. We do sell a lot of prints. We sell a lot of T-shirts.
And what would you say is the most unusual item?
Painted rocks that glow in the dark.
And let's talk about the coloring book.
I did 2 stories. I write. I'm a writer. But I thought I needed to do something for the whale. So I wrote Blue's Magical Christmas, which is on Amazon. You can buy it there. And it's a story about the whale. And he's watched all these people come and go. So one day, just magic, one Christmas, Santa takes him with him. Of course, he has to shrink with sparkles and all that. But the coloring book is quirky. It's a quirky, abstract kind of coloring book that I did for children. So it has word searches. It has coloring pages. How many fish can you draw? So it's the coloring book is a thing of mine that I did for children. Yeah.
And I'll have the link on the show notes page at route66podcast.com for the Amazon. Now, Linda, let me ask you a question. I want you to take a trip with me. I teach in New Jersey, and about 6 or 7 years ago, one of my students came up to the classroom during the current events period, and they start talking about Snapchat spectacles, like sunglasses, that were being sold at the Blue Whale.
Yes.
Tell us about that story.
I think we were the second site. We were not even told what it was going to be. They made contact with me, and I said we would. They didn't say. They said, can we do an event? It will be big. And I said, yes, you can. I'm all about it. And it was this amazing thing. My son did figure out. I asked him, I said, what is a new product that's just the rage right now? And my son said, I know what it is. So they came out the night before. They were here all night with security. They snuck the kiosk in the middle of the night under cover of darkness. And I said, okay, do I need to broadcast this? Do I need to put it out? And they said, oh, no. You do not. And they said, the minute that we put this out, you're not going to have to worry about a thing. It's just stand out of the way. I got phone calls from people were flying in. They were going to get on a plane and fly from other states to get here and get these classes. And they were here within 5 minutes of their first ping out that it was here and it was open. Oh my God, what's it doing at the Blue Whale? And but they knew what they were doing. They really did. And we had people here all day. They drove from all over. They came from other states. And I'm saying, they're calling me. News people are calling me. And I'm like, yes, it's really here. But I'm having to tell these people, do not get on a plane. They're not going to last that long. And they don't.
So for my listeners, these were sunglasses with a camera that were being sold out of a vending machine or a kiosk in remote places around the country. And here we are 6-7 years later. I later found out that in the vending machine, they were selling for $130, and people were turning around and selling them for $1,000.
I know. And, you know, we set a limit. They set a limit. I mean, we had a whole security crew here, and they were all in the background watching how fast the glasses were going. And, you know, they set a limit. At first, you could get 2, and then they're like, no, this is going way too fast. We need to get these down to 1. So they did take it down to 1. It was amazing. And when they told me that we were the second place, I think they came from California.
Right, Santa Monica was the first stop.
Yeah, and I think the Blue Whale was the second.
And what's interesting is it totally made a flop after that. Within 6 months, there was no support. Only 8% of the users who purchased them actually used them. And they had piles of these glasses sitting in warehouses that were supposed to be distributed, and they never were. It just never really caught on. So let's talk about another famous moment at the Blue Whale. In my research, I discovered that Mercedes-Benz filmed a car commercial there, which I'll have on the show notes page. Do you remember that for the 2019 Mercedes-Benz?
I was here. Blaine did most of the work with that. I was inside doing the gift shop. They made contact with me. I'm always their first contact. And then if it needs to be referred out somewhere else, you know, talk to Blaine.
Have there been any other references of the Blue Whale in pop culture or movies or commercials on TV?
I'm hearing, I hear that it is in Visa commercials that we have never seen, that I haven't seen, didn't know was happening. It is in a lot of commercials. It's in car dealership commercials, RV commercials, which I knew about. They filmed here. There have been movies. It's in sort of. It has been in a lot of movies.
Any memorable visitors to the Blue Whale?
There's been a lot of them. I mean, you know, different people are famous or known for first one thing and another. There's just been a lot of them have come in. They try to stay unrecognized, and others, they come in, and everybody knows who they are. But people are really good. They didn't hound them for autographs and things like that. And we've had musicians. And, one that really sticks in my mind was Paul McCartney's visit. Of course, it was unscheduled. That might have been on his schedule, but he didn't let anybody know he was coming. It wasn't a big fanfare thing. He had time off. He was with what became his wife. Come look around the area. Found out later on that any time that he comes to Tulsa for a performance, they have a particular place that they stay, and that was probably where they were headed. But I was getting ready to pull into the driveway. I'd been somewhere. I was pulling into the parking lot, and there was this Ford SUV pulling out of the parking lot, and he was a little toward the middle, so I had to pause for a minute until he could slightly move out of the way. And when we passed each other, of course, my driver's window and his driver's window were within 2 feet maximum of each other. His window was down, and mine was. And I looked at him, and I, of course, recognized him. And I make a stupid remark like, "Man, you look just like Paul McCartney." And his response is, "Well, I should. I am." And with that, he just made his turn and left. It was a surprise to it. He wasn't snappy about it or anything. He just simply answered my question. And I mean, you can't get too many guests any more well-known than he.
Yeah, incredible. Blaine, what type of work did you do for a living?
Well, I had basically two careers. I was an officer on Tulsa Police Department for 20 years, from 1971 to 91. It was a good time to be a police officer. We were respected.
Absolutely.
We were treated well. I had a part-time job, at the time it was Federal Express, it's now FedEx. And once I retired from the police department, I retired there in the morning, and I went full-time with FedEx. And I, among other things, of course, you do a lot of things at FedEx, but my primary job was a semi-driver for FedEx, and for the most part had a dedicated run from Tulsa to Memphis, Tennessee for 14 years.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for your duty as a police officer. So these days, Blaine, you are on the property of the Blue Whale. You're the caretaker. What is that like?
When I'm here, you can stay busy because there's always something that needs to be done. It's little things, but this place, like myself, isn't getting any younger, and as things get older, they need maintenance, just like we need to go see a doctor every now and then and get stuff done. There's daily stuff. I'm picking up trash all the time. People are nice, but you still have ones that can stand next to a trash barrel and somehow or another cannot get anything inside of there. So you have to pick up after them. And so that and repairing things. Right now I'm working on a project inside of our little gift shop. From that, I'm working on some new shelving and stuff like that in there. So I'm never without something to do.
And Blaine, what goes through your mind when you see a 5-year-old child at the Blue Whale?
You can look at their faces and see that their minds are working 90 miles an hour thinking, my gosh, for the most part, you can almost tell that they are really surprised at the size of the thing. They've heard of it, they've been told about it, they may have even seen pictures, they may have seen it on TV, but it's not like when you walk up and first see that thing.
What does Route 66 mean to you?
Oh my gosh. It's the people. It is, and people, you hear that all the time from everyone. Everyone probably tells you the same thing. It is the people that make it. They're all dreamers. They're believers. They dream they can save. They dream they can do, and they do it. They're all just like this magical group of people that are just destined to try to save histories of these places. And the good ones, if it has a history, I'm all over it. But it's the people. They're the kindest, sweetest, most sharing, giving people that I have ever met in my whole life.
And Linda,
the people that come through.
And Linda, I can honestly tell you, on behalf of all the Route 66 roadies, we're so grateful for your volunteering and helping out with Blaine at the Blue Whale to make it such a popular destination along the Mother Road.
Of course, it's getting older. There's no swimming anymore. Many things have taken care of that. Now, when it was in its heyday and it was a swimming hole, it was a lot different around here than it is now. I liked it better back when you could actually get in there and swim and not worry about whether the water was sparkling clean.
In its heyday, how many people would turn up for a dunk in the lake for swimming?
Oh, in its heyday, it was very easy during the summer when it was open. Have days that you would have 100 to 125 people there at the same time.
Wow. Oh, my gosh.
There are pictures to that effect, and it was quite a fun spot. And there was a lot of, of course, most of these were younger people. Parents and things like that would come, or grandparents would come with them, and they would usually do the picnic or the fishing or stuff like that while the rest of them swam. But crowds that size were normal here during its heyday.
All right. Well, Blaine, thank you so much. Before we say goodbye, why is Route 66 so important to you?
Well, I'm 78 years old, and I have never lived anywhere that was any farther than 3 miles off of Route 66. Most of my growing up and everything, 66 was the highway to go anywhere east or west. Well, it's actually southwest, northeast here. But that was the route that you traveled. And in doing so, I still do. I'll take turnpike occasionally, stuff like that. But 66 is still there. It has been resurfaced in a lot of places. They've taken out, thankfully, some dead man's curves, 90-degree turns in the roadway and stuff like that. But it's a wonderful, nostalgic highway to travel. There's others all over the United States, but they do not have the recognition that 66 does, and mystique, and the history of how people used it to get from one place to the other, and especially during the Depression and the hard times when people from Oklahoma were battered by the big dust storms and stuff like that, and they just had to do something better for their families, so they headed to the land of milk and honey, and some returned, some didn't.
Blaine Davis, yes.
Missed a lot, because we're still here, and we're doing great.
That was Blaine Davis and Linda Hobbs from the Blue Whale, a Route 66 icon in Oklahoma. Be sure to check out the show notes page to see some of the links and the video footage that was mentioned during the show. And now the trivia question. In my last episode, I spoke with Kevin Mueller, owner of the Blue Swallow Motel in Tucumcari, New Mexico. Kevin and his wife Nancy purchased a Blue Swallow after working for Valvoline in Michigan for over 20 years. Originally, what type of business drew them into Tucumcari before even considering the Blue Swallow? A pizzeria, and you can hear Kevin tell all about his wife's culinary skills at making pizza, but they weren't exactly sure they could turn that into a successful business. They stumbled onto the Blue Swallow, which was supposedly for sale, but the seller wasn't very eager to sell. Kevin tells the whole story, and one thing that he did not know about the Blue Swallow is how iconic it was, even before receiving the keys to the front door. In fact, on the Blue Swallow's Facebook page, it was just reported that Kevin and his wife will be moving on, and they're currently under contract with a new couple who they believe will be the right people to carry the torch, which was originally lit by Lillian Redmond way back in 1958. Kevin and Nancy, I'm so glad I was able to document your dedication and passion for preserving by far one of the most popular motels along the road. Good luck to the both of you as you ride into the sunset. Well, I hope you enjoyed our blue theme here on the podcast. Next time I have a new Route 66 friend who has written almost 20 books about the road and travel, and I recently met him at the Miles of Possibility conference in Illinois. His name is Jim Hinckley, and he has dedicated his life to promoting 66. Here's a highlight of my talk with Jim, who's from Kingman, Arizona, and he's been telling people exactly where to go.
You know, Route 66 is, for me personally, It's like a good pair of shoes or a well-worn, a comfortable saddle. It's like an old friend.
Now, Jim, you've written quite a few Route 66 books. Do you have a favorite Route 66 book that you've written?
Yes, it's always my favorite book that I've written will always be the last one I finished. So in this case, it would be Murder and Mayhem on the Main Street of America, Tales from Bloody 66.
And what prompted you to write that particular book, which really shows the darker side of the road?
We have a tendency to see Route 66 in the context of neon and tail fins. And it was so much more than that. It was literally the Main Street of America. But ghost towns just fascinate people. So I was intrigued by the idea there again when the publisher approached me. What happens if we link something as popular as Route 66 with ghost towns? And the ghost towns on Route 66, I found, they're very interesting. They're very unique. Some of them are very old, but yet they're products of the modern era. I always like to hit them with a bombshell at the end of my presentation, especially people who are not really familiar with Route 66. But the most amazing thing is that Route 66 doesn't exist.
Yeah.
It's not our most historic, most scenic, it's not our first, but it's always had the best press and publicity from its very inception. And as a result, it has, a long time ago, it morphed into far more than a highway. Do you remember the old commercial of the egg in the frying pan? This is your brain on drugs.
Cooking it, yes.
Well, that's Route 6 is almost like this is your highway designed by people on drugs. It goes nowhere on purpose. It was the longest highway in the United States, stretching from the tip of Cape Cod all the way to Long Beach, California. And what I mean by not going anywhere, it misses Chicago by like 20 miles. And it goes through the Worcester, Nevada, into Utah, misses Salt Lake City by about 30 miles. It's the only U.S. highway to run north and south, east and west. Route 66 is now viewed as the quintessential American experience. They see it as America personified. But for me, an original vehicle, that is as close to time travel as we're going to get. Find yourself a stretch of Route 66 and drive a 1930 Ford down that road. That's as close as you're going to get to time travel.
That's Jim Hinckley, Route 66 advocate, on the next episode of the Route 66 podcast. Before I say goodbye, please remember to leave me a voice message on our website about your favorite Route 66 t-shirt at route66podcast.com, and you might win a washable Route 66 face mask. Or you can also send it as an email at route66podcast@gmail.com. In addition, if you know anyone who is in grades K to 12, please encourage them to submit a Route 66 podcast scholarship entry. The deadline is July 31st, 2020. Lastly, I'll be traveling the eastern portion of the road this summer, and I would love to meet you for a quick hello. Please reach out to me through email, and maybe we can schedule something. Thank you for taking the journey with us here at the Route 66 podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Arno. Be well.